Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into the dark, mysterious figure who has become the very symbol of the tormented genius, Edgar Allan Poe.
Let's be honest, when you hear the name Poe, you probably picture a gloomy raven, a feverish artist scribbling madly by candlelight. But today, we're going to peel back the layers of that myth and question everything you think you know about him.
So here's the central clash we're digging into. On one side, you've got the myth, the mad genius, inspired by madness, a total slave to his emotions, and on the other, the reality, the methodical designer, driven by cold hard logic, a master of creating a specific effect in his readers. The gap between these two is staggering.
To really understand the man, and especially the myth, we have to start with the profound, unrelenting hardship that pretty much defined his entire existence.
From his earliest days, Poe's life was a total tightrope walk. Yeah, he was raised in a wealthy household, but he never truly belonged. He was never formally adopted. This left him with this constant sense of being an outsider, and it was coupled with crippling financial pressure from a foster father who could just turn off the money tap. It's what forced him out of university and into one of the toughest careers imaginable at the time.
And the publishing world back then? It was absolutely brutal. America had no international copyright laws, so publishers could just pirate bestsellers from Britain for free. I mean, why would you pay an unknown American writer when you could print Charles Dickens and make pure profit? The system was basically designed for American authors to fail.
But you know, worse than the poverty, worse than the constant struggle, was the relentless plague of tuberculosis. It was this shadow that just followed him his entire life, claiming almost every single person he loved and depended on. This wasn't a one-time tragedy. For Poe, it was a recurring nightmare.
So all of this trauma, this constant up-close exposure to death, it became a central theme in his work. It's a concept that scholars call thanatopsis. He wasn't just imagining horror. He was processing a very real, very personal trauma. He literally watched the people he loved wither away.
And this famous quote from him? It really says it all. This wasn't some dark, abstract idea. For Poe, the slow, tragic decay of beauty by disease was a lived, recurring horror. The process of watching a vibrant person be stolen by illness was to him the most powerful and heartbreaking story in the entire world.
So, okay, with a life this tragic, he must have been writing in a frenzy of grief and madness, right? Just pouring his raw pain onto the page. Well, the reality is the exact opposite.
In his own essay, The Philosophy of Composition, Poe completely pulls back the curtain. He reveals he wasn't a madman possessed by some muse, but a cold, calculating engineer of literature. He started with the end, he made sure every single piece served that ending, and most importantly, he reverse-engineered the feeling he wanted you to have.
Take his most famous work, The Raven. This wasn't a sudden burst of grief, it was math. Poe decided he wanted the ultimate feeling of melancholy. So he chose the most mournful-sounding vowels and consonants he could think of, O and R, and built the iconic refrain "Nevermore" from those sounds. It was pure auditory engineering.
And this analytical, almost scientific approach to writing, it led him to invent an entire genre that still completely dominates our culture today, the detective story.
I mean, think about it. The genius detective who outsmarts the clueless police. The loyal sidekick who narrates the story for us. The impossible locked room puzzle. Even the red herring, that fake clue meant to mislead you, that was all Poe. From Sherlock Holmes to every crime show on TV, they are all playing by the rules that Poe established.
And get this, his logical genius wasn't limited to fiction. His story about code-breaking the gold bug was so good it inspired actual U.S. military cryptographers during World War II. In his prose poem Eureka, he theorized about a single primordial particle expanding to create the universe, basically anticipating the Big Bang Theory. He even solved a famous astronomical paradox. This was not the mind of a madman.
And yet, for a man who controlled every single word of his writing so completely, the end of his own story was a chaotic and deeply unsettling mystery that he had no control over whatsoever.
After a lifetime of suffering, Poe was finally on the verge of a happy ending. He was engaged to his first love, but on the way to his wedding, he just vanished. He was found days later in a Baltimore gutter, barely conscious, wearing ill-fitting clothes that weren't his, and died in a hospital crying out the name Reynolds, and we still have no idea who Reynolds was.
To this day, the cause of his death remains one of literature's greatest mysteries.
Was he a victim of cooping, a violent form of election fraud where gangs would drug men and force them to vote? Or was it a disease like rabies or cholera? We just don't know.
But Poe's story doesn't end there. In a truly cruel twist of fate, his greatest enemy was about to get the last word, and in doing so, define his legacy forever.
Enter Rufus W. Griswold. He was a rival editor and critic who absolutely despised Poe. When Poe died, Griswold saw his chance not just to settle a score, but for a complete and total character assassination after his death.
Griswold's plan was methodical and it was vicious. He immediately published a slanderous obituary filled with lies. Then, he actually tricked Poe's grieving mother-in-law into making him the executor of Poe's work. He then forged letters and published a biography that painted Poe as the very monster we imagine today, a drug-addled, insane fiend with no morals.
But here is the ultimate stunning paradox. Griswold's lies backfired in the most spectacular way you could possibly imagine.
The public was completely captivated by this myth of the dark, degenerate genius. It was a thrilling, forbidden story. The more Griswold slandered him, the more books Poe sold. Griswold's revenge attempt accidentally turned Poe into a global dark icon and gave him the commercial success he never had in life.
So the crucial point is this. The image of Edgar Allan Poe that has fascinated all of us for over 150 years isn't the real man at all. It's the carefully crafted villain from his enemy's revenge plot. He was an architect of fiction who is made legendary by a fiction about his own life.
And that leaves us with a final, unsettling thought. In an age of endless information, it's worth asking ourselves how many of the stories we celebrate are actually the truth, and how many are just a better, more exciting lie. Thanks for joining us.